afternoon. So welcome to the Planning Committee meeting. I'm going to start for the sake of the record of the meeting by introducing myself and ask you all to introduce yourselves by name and your function. So I am the chairman of the Planning Committee. My name is John Medland. I'm a county councillor for Freshwater South. So if I pass to the left.
Hey, Chairman. My name is Ben Guard. I'm the legal advisor for Planning Committee.
Hi, Chairman. I'm Marie Bartlett. I'm Democratic Services Manager, clerking this evening's meeting.
Hi, Chairman. I'm Sarah MacDonald. I'm also a Democratic Services Officer and I'm just observing today.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Debbie Andre. I'm the ward member for Sandown North and I'm also Cabinet Member for Children's Services Education and Lifelong Skills.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Jeff Brody, Holloway Councillor for Pan and Barton and an ordinary rank and file member.
I'm Councillor Vanessa Churchman. My ward is Haylands and Swanmore in Ryde.
Councillor Claire Critchison for Chale, Knighton, Shorewell, Whitwell, and Chairman of the Isle of Wight Council.
Councillor Warren Drew. I'm the ward member for Ryde South East, member of Planning Committee and Vice Chairman.
Chris Jarman, I'm the ward member for the wonderful areas of Totland Bay and Cornwall Bay, and also a cabinet member for finance and related matters.
I'm Paul Fuller. I'm the cabinet member for planning and enforcement, and I'm also the ward councillor for Cowes West and Gurnard.
My name is Councillor Michael Lee. I'm the ward councillor for Ryde, Apley and Elmfield, acting as a reserve of committee member, Councillor Dave Adams.
Councillor Martin Oliver from the glorious ward of Mountjoy and Shide. Beautiful views all over Newport.
Councillor Chris Quirk, Councillor for Shanklin South.
Spink, Councillor for Freshwater North. Stewart, Councillor for Preston, Calbourne, Chelsea.
Emma Cox, Parish Councillor for Freshwater. I'm the IWalk rep for the Planning Committee.
Neil Triton, Highways Development Control Manager at Highland Road.
Good afternoon, Russell Chick, Planning Team.
Sarah Wilkinson, Planning Team Leader.
Good afternoon, Ollie Bolter, Strategic Manager for Planning and Infrastructure Delivery.
Thank you all very much. Just a few more preliminaries. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park, around the building to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts cannot be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it is safe to do so by a council member of staff. May I request that all mobile phones are switched off or switched to mute. I do remind all speakers to use the microphone so that they can be so that their voices can be heard in the recording. There's a request here, no food. I don't expect you to have lunch or dinner here, but if we can avoid eating, that's a good idea too. We cannot, obviously, the members of the committee cannot leave the council chamber while the presentation or debate on an application is in progress. If they do leave, they will be unable to vote on that application. Members of the public, both in the room and watching, you're here purely to observe the process and will not be permitted to speak unless you have registered to speak in advance. We have a lighting system for the timing of the various interventions. When you are asked to speak, the green light will display. Over here. The amber light will display for a few seconds and then the red light will display. At this point, I will stop you talking. This is to ensure, it's very good timing. I stop myself talking. At this point, to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time and that the process is seen to be fair. Okay, we're going to move to the agenda. And first point we're going to take is on the apologies. Do we have any apologies, Marie?
Chairman, we've been notified Councillor Adams is not here. He's sent his apologies. Councillor Lilly will be substituting for him, and Councillor Price is not here. Councillor Vanessa Churchman is substituting for him. Those are the only apologies I've received.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies anyone is aware of? The meetings of the previous minutes, is everybody happy that these are a true record of the meeting? A long time ago, actually. Thank you. A seconder, please. Thank you. So that's Councillor Quirk and Councillor Brodie. Are we all in favour of the minutes being approved? Thank you very much. Sign the minutes now. Bartlett, thank you. Right, I'll now go on to declarations of interest in items on the agenda. I'm going to start with myself and then I'll take others. I've been advised by the monitoring officer that I should leave the meeting for the first part of dealing with the Westridge application. And though I don't feel particularly or at all personally that I have to do this, but as a role of chair, I feel I have no choice but to follow the advice of the monitoring officer. This, of course, it's all up to us whether we follow the advice of the monitoring officer. I will choose to follow the advice of the monitoring officer for that item on Westridge. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, due to a timetable mix-up where it was sent out incorrectly and then sent out again correctly, during which between I'd rebooked my ferry, was unable to rebook it for yet another time. I was unable to attend the site visits. However, I have attended the Westridge site visit previously. I'm very familiar with the site, as I am with Pennyfeathers. I've been there several times, and I know the site of the barracks very well in East Cowes. I've also reviewed the material and quite happy that I'm familiar enough with the case to sit on it.
Thank you, Councillor Jarman. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Although it's only part of the relevant history, the outline planning for the Pennyfeathers does actually include a school, which may well come under my remit as cabinet member. I don't think that presents a conflict, but I just thought I would mention that for completeness.
Thank you, Councillor Andre. I'm not even sure the school is going to be built, is it? It's kind of hypothetical. Councillor Drew.
Although I don't consider myself predetermined in relation to Westacre, I am conscious that decisions and comments that I've made in public subsequent to that first hearing may be perceived as potentially being biased, and therefore on that basis I'm going to recuse myself for that part of the meeting and will remove myself from the room.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Quirk.
I voted for the resolution for Westacre at the last time it was read. Whilst I'm open to be persuaded otherwise, if by the events that's put this evening, I do consider myself to be predisposed, but not predetermined on this matter. Just wanted to clarify that. Although the monitoring officer has said that it's okay, I just wanted to clarify that some of us did adopt a position, but we are open to be persuaded otherwise if there is something new.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Yes, the monitoring officer did point out that how we voted in previous meetings on the same subject is not relevant for this evening in terms of declarations of interest. Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, I've written it down, so excuse me to read it out. I am attending as a reserve planning committee member as listed by the Alliance Group for Councillor Dave Adams, who is unable to attend due to recovery from operation. I wish to make the following declaration in regard to the 3 planning applications on the agenda tonight as follows. 1 Westacre Park, 2 Pennyfeathers and 3 Victoria Barracks. I wish to fully declare that I have no personal or non-pecuniary or pecuniary interests and my own and in any of the applications, and my only involvement in these applications have been as a properly elected representative for Isle of Wight Council, Ryde East 2017 and 2021, and Ryde Appley and Elmfield since 2021 wards. I've only ever spoken or written on the named applications as an elected representative. I've only ever advocated as an elected ward councillor the views and projections of residents of the said wards. I've never personally represented my own views or interest in relation to these applications, and in this regard, not predetermined. In regard to Westacre Park, I only wish as a member of planning committee tonight to fully speak in relation to this application as the elected ward councillor that has the site within the ward of Ryde, Appley and Elmfield. I will not take part in the debate or vote. I will not attend the site. I did not attend the site visit as a matter of probity. I will, as a matter of probity, withdraw from the room when I have fully spoken as a planning committee member tonight in my role and right as an elected Isle of Wight, elected ward councillor. I am duty bound to advocate and represent the views of my residents unimpeded and without intimidation. In regard to Pennyfeathers, I wish as a member of planning committee tonight to fully speak in relation to this application, but do acknowledge that my ward is neighbours Ryde South East, that includes Pennyfeathers side, and fully take part, but I will wish to take fully part in the debate and vote. I did not go on the site visit as I'm fully aware of the site and read all the documentation on the portal and fully briefed. I wish to particularly to reaffirm I have no personal non-pecuniary or pecuniary interest in this application and was not involved in any way when the outline planning permission application for Pennyfeathers was granted, as I was not an elected member of the Isle of Wight Council at the time and had no personal involvement in any way. I only ever acted or spoken or written word on Pennyfeathers as the elected Isle of Wight Council representative of Ryde East Ward from 2017 to 2021, which included Pennyfeathers, and from 2021 as the elected representative Ryde, Appley and Elmfield, which is the neighbouring ward. I do wish to speak on this application, but purely as a member of this committee. I reserve the right to decide at the appropriate time whether to vote or not. I do this in case I do in this case have a predisposition towards housing, especially social housing, which is desperately needed at Ryde. I wish to point out that I did not vote for this site to be removed from the draft island plan as presented to full council, and in fact voted for its inclusion. I've never spoken against the fact the site has outline planning permission. I quite rightly, as an elected member, have raised questions on the long delay in the reserved matters coming to this committee and the resulting consequences, such as 2 eyesore derelict houses left in my ward as part of the proposal tonight. I declare, can I just finish? I declare that I come here tonight not predetermined, but with an open mind, although I wish to speak as a neighbouring ward member with pertinent questions, comments and observations that I think are important for members to know. If I gain satisfactory answers and responses from listening to the applicant and officers, I can be persuaded to support the application. I think it's important that there is balanced view tonight, and I think my contribution will help with this. In regards to Victoria Barracks, I wish to declare that I made the decision that as this application site was part of a programme of sites visits, including Westacre Park, I would not attend the site visit. Out of probity, I decided that as I did not want to be wrongly accused of any influence to members of the planning committee in any way regard those applications, I would make my own arrangements to visit the sites, which I have done, So I'm fully briefed and able to take part in the debate, discussion and vote on this item. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. As I've done previously, I declare that I'm a member of the CPRE, now called the Countryside Charity. And I think I'm right in saying that they've objected to both the Westacre Park and also Pennyfeathers application. I'm simply a member. I was a trustee, but I resigned that when I became a member of the planning committee. It does not cause me to be predetermined in any way. I have also, and I declare it as I have done, I think on previous occasions, that I have contributed financially to the crowdfunding scheme for judicial review of Westacre Park. I've considered this very carefully, and I think those of you who know me will, I hope, know that I take these things quite seriously, or very seriously. And indeed, I have recused myself on numerous, well, not numerous, but on several occasions since becoming a member of planning committee, when I have thought that I am either predetermined or alternatively viewed objectively could be seen to be predetermined or biased. As far as my support of the judicial review is concerned, I supported that judicial review and continue to support that judicial review, and indeed made a statement in the proceedings, because I was concerned, to say the least, by what I considered to be procedural unfairness. I am not predetermined with regard to whether or not planning consent should be granted to Westacre. I may be predisposed, I am certainly not predetermined. It is quite possible and quite proper to say that I disagree with what I perceive as the unfairness of the procedure relating to the previous planning application. That does not disqualify me from hearing this application, because I trust that this application will be heard fairly, nor does it make me predisposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spink. Councillor Brodie.
Chairman, can I remind committee colleagues the Westacre Park application has been brought back to committee for consideration of the revised habitat enhancement and mitigation works compensate for the loss of curlew habitat. And that is the opinion of officers that no other material matters have changed to justify any other elements of the permission being reconsidered. As one of those on the committee, in July 2021, I may have taken a view on the substantive application.
Sorry, maybe we'll leave this.
Yes, I'm declaring an interest.
Oh, you're declaring an interest now.
Right, that's typical. Are you going to conduct this meeting fairly? Are you going to conduct this meeting fairly, Councillor Medlin?
Councillor Brodie, I thought you went off the subject there, but you're giving a declaration of interest.
And I am declaring an interest.
Right, okay.
As one of those on the committee in July 2021, I may have taken a view on the substantive application before us, but at no time have I expressed a view on the loss of curlew habitat. Therefore, I am not predetermined and I am not on the issue before us predisposed. Thank you for allowing me to take a few seconds to declare an interest.
I do apologise. I thought you were going on to a different subject, but I think this was clarified by the monitoring officer saying that our history of voting on this issue is not pertinent. Is there anyone else? No? So we're going to finish and we'll move on to questions from the public. Public question time, 15 minutes. What do we have? Any questions from the public? So no questions have been submitted. So in that case, we move on to the next, which is agenda item 4. Now, at this point, I think I have to leave. sorry, 5? 5. Thank you. At this point, I have to leave the room, I believe, because it's up to the committee now to carry out the election of another chairman, as both myself and the vice chairman have been advised to recuse ourselves from this part of the meeting.
Members of the committee, as we have no chairman and no vice chairman, can I ask for nominations for a chairman for this item of business? Are you happy to accept that? Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Oliver. Are there any other nominations? Councillor Jarman.
Nominating Councillor Nick Stewart.
Do I have a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor Andre. Can I take that? Yeah, Councillor Stewart, sorry, are you accepting that?
Good evening, members. First time on the microphone this evening. The way that we'll proceed now is take a straight vote, those in favour of each candidate. Happy for me to start. So those in favour, please, of Councillor Chris Quirk, please show your hands.
1, 2, 3.
Those in favour of Councillor Nick Stewart, please show your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Any abstentions? Councillor Stewart is elected.
Councillor Stewart is elected.
Good morning, committee. Thank you for giving me your confidence. And I'd like to say thank you to all the officers who've been so diligent about preparing the information in front of us. It is a difficult job to do, and we recognise that there are things there that we as elected councillors will want to discuss and talk about as elected councillors, which may or may not differ from what the officers put forward. The reason I'm here, obviously, is that as the newest member to this committee, quite clearly I have no predisposed view whatsoever. I have an opinion, as I hope everybody else here does as well. before us is the one application where you have to deal with it with me in the chair. Hopefully, they will allow me to pass back to Councillor Medland afterwards. This application is land south of Apley Road land south of Apley Road, north of Bullen Road, and east of Hope Road, West Acre Park, Ryde. At this stage, what I think we should normally do, and I apologise to my colleague here, my officer here, if I take the wrong steps. I hope you will grant me the courtesy that any mistakes I make will be honest, true, and hopefully very, very few. What I would expect to see here, as in all of the committee meetings that I've ever led, is that all people will have a chance to speak, or in certain cases to present what they have to say. I think it's fair to say that at this stage we should all start considering what we have to say, and I think it's reasonable. So what I will ask is that we ask the responsible officer to present to us, and then we will have an opportunity to discuss that further. Thank you.
May I just raise the point? I don't know this is the correct time, but before the presentation, the options available to this committee in the officer's report are summarising it. One, to agree the amended heads of terms to the legal agreement to include provision for the mitigation land. That's a summary. Two, to require alternative mitigation. Three, to reconsider the application in its entirety. Now, the reason that I raise this now is this, that I and other members on this committee, including your good self, Chair, were not members of this planning committee at the time that planning committee approved, as it were, the application. I won't say granted planning permission because no decision notice has been issued. Now, in deciding which of those three options to take, those of us who've not been on planning committee before would require, in my respectful submission, and it's only proper, a presentation of the case in entirety. Now, whether or not the officer is in a position to do that or intends to do that, and whether or not, therefore, consideration of the application in entirety can take place tonight, and there's sufficient time for that to do so. I only raise it now because I don't want to waste time, as it were, in only considering the discrete part of it, which is the required further mitigation. So I simply raise that now.
I will take advice on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Spink is quite right. The matter that is before you is the application in its entirety. And what has happened since the previous resolution of the committee is that an additional material consideration has been alerted to the planning authority, and that has resulted in the matter being brought back to you. It is the correct legal position that this authority must make its decision in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In running through that exercise, it must have regard to all material planning considerations, and the matter before you in relation to the curlew and the habitats is not one that has been considered previously. And therefore, it's quite right that the matter in its entirety, together with the curlew and habitat, is before you today. So it is quite right that the entire application is before you for consideration. So the options that will remain to you are wide-ranging. They're to approve subject to conditions as identified in the report, as amended, to refuse, and I could go on. But I now hand over to Mr. Bolter, who will clarify perhaps the report that's coming to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you through the chair. Yes, to echo the point that Councillor Spinker's made, absolutely correct. The whole item is was available to be before members this evening. And in light of that, and being mindful of the fact that there were a number of members who were not present when the original resolution was passed, the presentation this evening is going to be the same presentation that was received by the original committee when the first resolution was brought forward. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brodie.
Can I just have clarification then? If we're going to have the full presentation from July 2021, isn't it the case that we should also have the entirety of the report before us tonight? The entirety. We haven't been presented with it. I'm aware that it's available on the website, but human beings being human beings, I would say most members of this committee will only have looked at the papers that have been presented to them tonight. I must say that I misunderstood entirely the purpose of this meeting. That's not that unusual for me to misunderstand things on during this administration, I have to say. But certainly it was my view, very clearly, and I know it was a member of other members of the council, that the issue before us tonight was the issue of the mitigation of curlews, which could lead to a rejection of the overall application, but not a revisiting of the myriad points that we considered back in July 2021. A meeting that I will say was conducted entirely in accordance with procedure, contrary to what Councillor Spinker asserts, and as I'm sure can be confirmed by our legal officers. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor, thank you for that. Can I, if I speak, it may give you an option not to. I'm sure that's appropriate, but Councillor Brodie, thank you very much. You've raised the point which I think is quite important, which actually the final statement, the final proposal in front of us to accept or reject the whole application, it also gives the option to defer it, given that there is perhaps insufficient time or certainly insufficient information currently in front of us. I'm only too aware that the officers may not necessarily be completely briefed at this very moment on the entire application, which is of course a very substantial application. Can I take Councillor Spink if it's brief, and then I'd like to have the planning department.
I would ask, please, that this matter is deferred. I was aware from reading the supplementary report from the case officer that the whole application could be reconsidered, but I can see entirely why members of this committee may not have realized that, and as a result may not even have read the full report, and there would be no criticism in that case. It's impossible, therefore, in my submission, to do for those councillors with the best wish and the will in the world to do justice to considering this case. They've not read the documentation, I suspect, through no fault of theirs. And it was perhaps rather a bold listing to put before this committee the whole. I wish to address you, if I may, Chair, without interruption. You can't listen, even with your considerable talent, you can't listen to two conversations.
Councillor Spink, I apologise.
No. So the preparation, it seemed to me it's unrealistic that we could consider tonight and do justice to Westacre in the absence of the original report being included in the papers. Secondly, the listing was somewhat optimistic, it seems to me, because it would have been a huge amount of preparation in a short period of time to read all the Westacre papers, 990 documents, together with all the penny farthing papers, which I think were even more, together with, by comparison, the modest Barratt's papers. And it does seem to me that if we proceed to consider Westacre in detail, it may be subject to some form of appeal and very unwise tonight.
Councillor Spink, thank you for your thoughts. Councillor Jarman?
I find myself, I wasn't expecting this, I have to say. This is, I'm certainly in accordance with what Councillor Brodie and Councillor Spink have just said, that I had regarded this to be a very narrow matter, and it now appears that it is far from a narrow matter from what we've just been told. I'd found my views on that to be cemented by option 3, which was to reconsider the application in its entirety. I had not expected that if we chose option 3, that we would then be reconsidering the application in its entirety effectively this evening. That's far from what I'd anticipated. Many of the documents were quite some time ago now, and I have to confess that although my memory is not bad, it's also not infallible. And in that regard, I cannot say that I am fully prepared to reconsider in discussion the whole of the issue this evening. And so I must second Councillor Spink's motion to defer.
Thank you, Councillor Jarman. I'm not sure we've actually got a motion in front of us at the moment, but it's something which I'm going to take advice.
I'm happy to make that motion unless other members would wish to have further discussion.
Duly seconded. My
My motion is that we should defer today for the reasons that I've set out in some detail.
So yes, I was simply going to come in to say that that is an option that is before this committee. Absolutely. My apologies if I didn't list it in the options that are available in my summary at the start, but absolutely. It is open to this committee to defer for further consideration of the papers to enable the application to be properly determined at a future planning committee. And that you have now, Chairman, a proposal which has been seconded by Councillor Jarman, and you could now move to the vote on that.
Sorry, one second. So I get it in the right order. I do
right.
apologise. So I understand that several people wish to speak. So we will take Councillor Brodie, Councillor Churchman and Councillor Lilly in that order, please.
Just very quickly, could we just also have clarification then? If we defer it, we're setting a bit of a precedent here, Chair. A significant precedent. Looking round the room, there are 10 members of the committee here. 6 of them were here at the end of July 2021. 4 are new to the. That happens all the time on this committee. Does this mean that decisions will have to keep coming back in the future to this committee for reconsideration because it doesn't suit some of the newer members of the committee? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Churchman.
I sat on the original Westacre application when we built 80 odd houses. Those houses are now in situ. To me, coming here tonight, as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at the other half of, or 2/3 of the farmland. What has gone before, in my book, it's over and done with. That we're going back 2 or 3 years to the original planning committee decision. And I don't see, what are we going to defer to? There's been so much publicity about the whole of the Westacre site that I can't believe that even members who weren't here before haven't picked up different vibes. As far as I'm concerned, as a planning member, I've come here to discuss this, for good or for bad, determination or whatever. And I personally would prefer we get on with the job. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Churchland. Councillor Lilly.
I, like my colleagues, came here tonight on the basis that we were talking about the curlew. And I have focused as the local one purely on that, not actually making reference to the original application. So I am shocked, as everybody else, that we were actually looking at the entirety with it. And actually, I do feel that we do need to actually defer it on the fact that I, as someone who came, was both very much involved, have completely prepared wrongly on the fact that I thought, like Councillor Churchman, we were just coming to actually talk about the curlew. So on that basis, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
I have two more people who wish to speak. So if we could have Councillor Quirk first and then Councillor Andre, please.
We have three options before us. It might be worth voting on the three options and then going to, if the third option is approved, going to the referral, because certainly you can't discuss that third option this evening because we haven't got all the information. But maybe it would be better to actually look at the three options that we have, because if you pass one or two, then it doesn't become valid.
I'm going to ask Councillor Andre to speak, and then if I could ask Mr. Gard to speak after that to provide some information for the committee to consider.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I am one of those 4 members that didn't sit on the original committee when Westacre Park came forward. I am, and for that reason, and the reason that, like a lot of colleagues, it would appear, I thought we were considering the mitigations rather than the entirety of the application. But what I would like to know is would there be any significant impacts in deferring before we actually take that decision in terms of timescales?
Thank you, Councillor Andre. I will pass over to Mr. Gard in one moment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd simply come in now to suggest that if the reason for deferral is due to a lack of information on the application form, my suggestion is that it's imperative that you make that decision early, so we don't move to debate the item, that matter is put to a vote now. And it may be that members wish to hear the presentation first and then wish to move the motion to be put to vote, or if it simply is that you're aware because of your preparations for the committee in terms of the paper that you've read, we do have the motion, it's on the floor and it is ready to be voted on. And so I would urge that if it is a motion based on the need for further time to consider the background papers to enable full consideration of the application, as put by Councillor Spink, that is the motion that's voted on first, rather than working through the planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair, I'm able to confirm to Mr. Gard that the principal reason is, for the motion, is that a number of councillors have said, A, that they're not prepared and haven't read the officer's report because they were under the misapprehension that it was to be considered in that only the mitigation of the curlews was to be considered. And if there are a number of committee members who feel that they're ill prepared through no fault of their own, then the motion, in my respectful submission, is properly made. The other point is that Councillor Lilly has said that he was under that misapprehension and has only prepared a speech to address committee on the basis of the curlews. And it would be unfair in my submission to the ward councillor to consider the whole application in entirety without hearing from him on the whole application, which he's not prepared. And again, in my submission, through no fault of his own. So I do press the motion for the reasons that you've said and the reasons that I've outlined.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. I think it's safe to say, I will come back to you in 1 minute. I think it's safe to say that there is a range of opinions here. We'll take some final comments, but I think after that we will go straight to the motion for deferral.
Thank you, through the chair. So just to pick up on a couple of points that have come up in the discussion to date, I would just highlight that the previous report is hyperlinked in the current report in front of you. We have taken the format of this report to be consistent with items that we have previously brought back to committee following a previous committee resolution, but then a decision not being issued. And I think what we officers are not doing, and nor should we, is to direct councillors to say that they can only consider their curlew mitigation or that they can only revisit the whole application. That is entirely a decision for the members of the planning committee to make. Now, I think the officer advice would be to say, we are, through the paper, we have identified those changes that we believe are material to the committee's previous resolution, and we would consider that previous resolution to be material in the decision-making process at the moment. And we would say that members may wish to revisit the whole thing or simply look at the mitigation in front of them, or the mitigation proposal in front of them. As I have said, officers would advise that the things that the members may wish to look at will be the things that have changed since the resolution, i.e. the issues covered in the update paper. I think that's all I would add, Chair. Thank you.
Please, Councillor Spink.
If I may, the difficulty with that advice, if I may say so, is this, that if we concentrate on the curlew mitigation, and if we were to find that the mitigation is not sufficient, we would then effectively be either then in a position of having to defer for further mitigation, or we would then have to consider the application again its entirety, because otherwise the only ground of refusing would be the curlew mitigation. And we would not have an opportunity of putting before committee the other aspects which may or may not, depending on committee's view, form additional grounds for refusal or for granting. So I don't, in my respectful submission, agree with that advice.
Well, we spread our wings even further. We have the monitoring officer on the screen as well, who wishes to provide some. Councillor Cox, I apologise. I will make sure that you have the opportunity to speak after the monitoring officer, and I welcome the monitoring officer's interjection. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Councillor Stewart. My advice, having listened to the comments made, would be that I would advise deferral of this particular application on the basis that information is clearly thought to be needed to be put before councillors, and I think on a belt and braces approach, it would be a right thing to defer so that preparation can be undertaken for all those involved in the decision making, including those who weren't present in the July 2021 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. He's run away already. More than the rest of you can do. Councillor Cox.
I think that I don't need to speak now. Thank you.
Committee, I would like to have a confirmation that you wish to push that deferral motion and for a seconder to that motion.
I do wish to continue with the motion, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. You're quite right to insist on that type of thing. And as always, Councillor Brodie, I'm sure will have something succinct and clear to put to us.
Yeah, I do apologise, but I haven't had an answer to my question about implications for the future. And secondly, can I formally request that we have a named vote on this motion? Thanks very much.
I will call upon Mr. Bolter to provide some information, and I absolutely agree with a named vote.
As far as we would advise, Jeff, this is a route that the committee is able to take, and it has the ability to do that. I think purely from a planning procedural perspective, obviously that will delay a decision being issued, and the applicant has a range of options available to them in light of a decision not being issued. But they've had that range of options to them since the resolution was passed at the previous committee a couple of years ago.
Are we going to, is this going to cost us money as a council? If we defer it and the applicant starts, I don't know, can he appeal against any of these decisions? Could he claim compensation for not being able to continue work, etc.?
Councillor Churchman, thank you. That goes straight to the original question which Councillor Brodie had brought up, which is what are the results? The bottom line, gentlemen and ladies, and everybody else here, we are taking serious decisions. Any decision we make will have repercussions, both financial and timing, and all number of other issues, which I think we're all aware of. So I'm sure that it is impossible to quantify the cost of a decision to defer, although I suspect Councillor Jarman probably has a better idea than I do. However, it is always better to do the right thing, even if that includes possible costs.
Excuse me, Chair, that has not always been officer advice. I will say that now. Ashley Road was a classic example where there were 300 houses to be built. We threw it out and we then incurred costs of $250,000, and that's going back 15 years. So I'm sorry, it is a consideration. Councils across the country are strapped for cash, and we cannot ignore that fact.
Councillor Quirk, if I could ask Mr. Gard to speak briefly, and then obviously you will have an opportunity to speak, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very, very briefly, This committee's now heard advice from both myself and the council's monitoring officer. Whilst I note the concerns of Councillor Churchman in terms of cost, and invariably whenever we pull together people into a room for a meeting, there will be a cost attached to it. There are officers here today and there will be at the next meeting. And it's quite right that there is the option available to the applicant, as I understand it, to appeal for non-determination. This committee is clear about what it requires in order to bring the item back to committee, and that's time, as I understand Councillor Spink's motion, to consider the papers. It's more important to the strength of the council's decision that everybody involved in reaching a resolution on the application is fully briefed and ready to make a decision on the application and is aware of all of the material planning considerations. We have to be able to show that in order to defend any challenge against a decision. And it is on that basis that the advice that was given to you here today was given to you by the council's monitoring officer. It's absolutely essential that all of the people in the room are aware of what they are considering. And I've nothing further to add. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Quirk.
I was going to make the point about non-determination and that they can make a claim basis for non-determination. I'm not sure that they would. I actually support deferral, but if they were to make a claim and it goes to review, there is a cost because we lose the new homes bonus if it's decided to appeal. So that I don't know what it would be in this case, but I suspect £1 million or so.
Yeah, finally, if
I was just about to speak to you, Councillor Spink. I was going to ask whether you have a wording for your motion, which you could present.
Certainly. My motion is, let me just think, my motion is that the application in relation to Westacre Park be deferred in view of the fact that a number of members of this committee, through no fault of their own, did not consider that the entire planning application was could be considered, and had therefore only prepared the papers in regard to the mitigation in relation to the curlews point. Not very.
Councillor Brodie, I was looking for a seconder for that motion. I suspect you weren't doing that. No.
Do you want to get your second up, and then I'd like to say something.
Councillor Jarman, you're supporting that motion for deferral based on the wording that Councillor Spink has provided.
Yes, with the specificity of that wording, yes. I think for the third time, but the specificity is important.
Councillor Brodie.
Sorry, Chair. It's I want to vote for deferral, but I don't think we need that exceptionally long decision. All we need is to vote to defer. We don't need all the embellishments in it, in my view. If it's that, I will have to vote against it. Thank you.
Then you may blame me because I insisted on specific wording and I put him on the spot there and then. And I suspect he's probably shorter than I would have been. I take your point entirely, Councillor Brodie there. So we should move to a named vote on the deferral because I think that it is clear that the majority of the committee has made a decision on whether to defer or not. Unless there is a very clear additional point to be made, Councillor Spink?
There is, I'm afraid, Chair. If I don't want, as it were, to discourage Councillor Brodie from voting for my motion, which he said he will not do, if my motion includes the reasons that I've put forward. And therefore, I was encouraged with respect to enlarge upon my motion by your good self. My motion, and I think it's about the 5th time now that it's been put, and hopefully it will be seconded. My motion, therefore, is this, and I hope this meets with agreement. My motion is therefore this, that the application of Westacre Park be deferred in light of advice and discussion received and taken place tonight.
Then you have my apologies for forcing you to make it longer originally, but we have a decent motion. Councillor Jarman is clearly in favour of this. Can we move to the vote, please? Can I have those in favour? It is a named vote.
Councillor Andre, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Christensen, Councillor Jarman, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Spink and Councillor Stewart.
And if I could have those against that motion?
Councillor Churchman and Councillor Oliver.
And do we have any? I don't think we have any abstentions at all. Right, so that motion is carried. This matter is now deferred. I will now run away and go back to my normal seat.
I wonder, Chair, if we might take a 5-minute recess. We have been going for an hour now. It would seem an appropriate time just to have a small comfort break while people move chairs.
I think it's fair to say that we should have a break briefly at this point. 5 minutes sounds reasonable. It will also give time for Councillor Medland to come back and rescue me.
Can I thank you, Interim Chair, for actually conducting that extremely well. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for taking your seats and restarting the meeting. We're now going to deal with the second item, which is the Victoria Barracks, Albany Road and East Cowes. I think who is going to be speaking on this? So I'm going to hand over to Russell Chick for the presentation on this. Please, Russell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. So this planning application relates to the barracks building in East Cowes, which we visited on. Should be working, sorry. Right, hopefully you can hear me. Don't have to miss anything. Right, so yes, this relates to the barracks building in East Cowes, which is located just to the north of the town centre. Right then, so hopefully you can hear me now. Good, okay. Right, so I'll start again. So the planning application relates to the barracks building, which is a locally listed building in the East Cowes Conservation Area, just to the north of the town centre. Councillors will remember on site there was a large factory building located to the north, previously in use by GKN, now used by T-Mill, also known as Rapa Nui. To the south is the iconic Columbine building with its Union Jack front door. And then in the hinterlands around the site, there is residential development as well. And I've shown those closest to the site. Some cottages that the committee bus parked opposite to on Friday, just at the point of the cursor now, which are about 46 metres away from the main building. And then there's Prince's Court, a new building just to the north of the Waitrose car park, which is a block of flats currently vacant at ground floor, but the upper flats are in use. And that's about 21 metres away. The other properties, an old road, range between 40 and 70 metres away. This slide is just showing the designations that relate to the site and its surroundings. So the dots off to the west there, they relate to the SPA boundary, zone and protection area. The application site is also within flood zone 3, so just at the point of the cursor here, that's the application site. A little temple icon there means that the site is locally listed. It's not fully listed, but it is locally listed, so it's a heritage asset. And the pink hatching shows that the site is within a conservation area. Just a few snaps of the site then from long distance here, showing the front of the building here. Members will recall it on site. There are some closer in photographs in a moment, but there is a large former parade ground to the front of the main building. There is also what's called the guardhouse in the southwest corner of the site. And then the photograph C is just showing the rear of the building, and there is a large and quite characterful stone wall around that section of the building. And at the front, there is a lovely set of railings as well. So the proposals are to change the use of the existing barracks building. Currently, the use for the building is office use, and the frontage of the site is completely used as a car parking area, and then the existing guardhouse is used as a store. So the proposals are to convert the existing barrack block and to extend it. That would result in 72 bed spaces in 12 dormitories throughout the building at both ground and first floor level. And there would be space there also for 6 teachers to stay on site. So these would be students visiting the site on a weekly basis generally, both in the mainland and local schools as well. So ground floor would also include space for a sort of meeting or teaching area, and that would double as a dining area with room for 60 people. On the northern side of the application site of the main building would be an extension to provide an entrance, and that would also include toilets and showers. And this is just showing the first floor, which is obviously smaller. This is the more historic building here, the historic core of the building, showing the first floor mainly accommodation. And then you can see the roofs for the existing flat roof bit on the back and for the proposed extension on the side, which will be single story. Just going to show you some photographs of the main buildings, and these relate to the proposed plans in a moment. So This is the front elevation of the building, which was built in, I think, 1852 from memory, for Queen Victoria's troops to stay at. And so quite a characterful building, an important part of the conservation area. And you can see here that the existing main entrance is this large, rather unsightly sliding door. And then there's also this section off to the south of the existing southern rear extension. So these plans are showing those areas, the existing building, the sliding doors and the sliding doors here. They will be replaced. So a set of sliding doors here will be replaced with a window to match those existing building. All of the windows would be replaced and the roof would be replaced as well, because the building's in quite a bad state at the moment. And then the single story extension, which I was discussing just now, is just shown off there to the north. And that would be the main entrance to the building. And looking at the rear, councillors were pointing out this flat roof glazed section above the main wall to the back of the site there, which you can see from Maresfield Road. The proposals are to, again, reface the elevations on the rear and improve the roof and the windows, and then to reglaze the existing flat roof section and re-roof it as well. Then looking at the side elevation, the proposals here would be much more benign, and so you're looking at very minor changes really to the elevations in that section of the site. This is the south elevation that faces the town centre. And then the northern elevation here, where there's some existing flat roof buildings, which are not really in keeping with the design of the building, they will be removed to make way for the extension, which we saw the front elevation to just now. And moving to the guardhouse, this occupies quite a prominent section of the highway, right on the corner of Albany Road and Columbine Road. And you can see here the attractive railings there, which are very historic. They would be repaired, and then so would the store building as well. So it would be re-roofed and it would simply be used as a store at this time. And so these elevations are just showing the removal of some unsightly previous extensions and the reinstatement of windows and doors to improve the appearance of the building. And the application is recommended for conditional approval, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think at this point we can call the on two people. So I'd like to ask next Mr. Cameron Palin, speaking on behalf, Councillor Cameron Palin, speaking on behalf of East Cowes Town Council, speak for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I hope it won't take that long. As you hear, I'm on behalf of the Town Council commenting on this application. Over the past 2 years, the Town Council have been working closely with Chris Ashman, his colleagues from Regeneration, and a multitude of agencies, including UKSA, on the holistic regeneration of our esplanades. This project was given the real chance to get off the ground running thanks to the successful levelling up bids put in by the administration with our support as a Town Council. We're excited that alongside restoring this building and preserving the heritage of the building, UKSA will provide further unique, memorable opportunities and experiences for our young people. Not only that, but this will be a great asset for our community. With our existing relationships, partnerships and ability to work together, we believe this could become a valuable maritime learning and event space for all to use. With the Classic Boat Museum just next door, who hosts the sailing simulator, maritime heritage, artefacts and much more. The UKSA in this development would fit right into our community. Not just that, but after many conversations, an agreement in principle has been made that the community would be able to use the parade ground and the guardhouse just mentioned for special events, and yet this is just another sign of them giving back to our community. UKSA are already very supportive of our island and our young people. We are in discussions about the possibility of local schools having sailing lessons, which would be amazing for the children of East Cowes. In East Cowes, we do have many deep pockets of poverty, and without charities such as this, these children would never get the opportunities to experience sailing on the sea in these small boats. So now it's the time to show our appreciation of what they do and support the development that will give much more back to the community. Because it's not taking anything away. This building has been derelict for many years, and now it's that chance to give it a new lease of life and actually give something back that our whole community can use. As a town council, we are aiming to make the Esplanade an accessible public connection to the sea, with many leisure activities. It's already been used year-round by the community, but to improve links of sailing and further water sports will only boost our town and our island's economy. Further improvements to our esplanade as part of the levelling up package and others set to come before you very soon will boost our esplanade and its glorious views. We are proud of our maritime heritage and we believe this development will help us grow further. Therefore, equipping our young people with knowledge and skills for the future, this will help expand vocational opportunities, our island's heritage, skilling up young people for work, enabling us to grow our island's economy as well as our arts and culture. I'd urge you to support this opportunity, help this charity grow and give East Cowes the fresh leaf of life that it needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palin. I now ask Councillor Julie Jones-Evans, who's the Cabinet Member for Levelling Up, Regeneration, Business Development and Tourism, because you've got a long title,
And one leisure as well.
oh, sorry, and One Leisure, so to comment on the application. Julie.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for letting me speak and support this application as Cabinet Member and this evening. I think it's important for the committee to be reminded of the wider context of this project as part of their consideration of the application. The Barracks project is one element of the £8 million investment into the East Cowes Marine Hub, levelling up funded scheme, as we just heard from Councillor Palin. The investment in the Columbine building to create more marine manufacturing jobs is already underway, with a new 50-ton boat hoist and renovated manufacturing space being created. The other element is a new public realm and event space at East Cowes Esplanade, immediately in front of the newly renovated barracks. This will be subject for planning application coming to committee shortly. While considering applications on their own merits, it's obviously important. I know that the committee values understanding how this fits in with the part of a wider plan. The plan is the East Cowes Waterfront Improvement Strategy, which has been co-designed with the local stakeholders to build on the original HCA master plan for the town. The key difference this time is the involvement of the local community. You just heard from Councillor Palin, and I myself sit on one of the boards, which is very, very informative and has a wide range of local representation. This is central to our regeneration approach, of our place planning approach. Consultation on the wider strategy and the individual elements, such as the barracks application, has been comprehensive and is ongoing as each element is implemented. We're all aware of the fantastic work UKSA, the tenant for the refurbished building, already doing in Cowes in opening up our fantastic marine sports environment to the most disadvantaged youngsters on the island and beyond. This investment will enable them to train more young people to be confident in their abilities and go on to secure jobs, potentially in the maritime sector. The sector has always been a key part of the island's economy, and the wider Solent and the East Cowes Marine Hub will play a key part in that, providing improved marine manufacturing facilities and training opportunities via the barracks plan. Youngsters using the barracks, possibly visiting the island for the first time, will experience all that is good about East Cowes, the Medina Valley and the wider island, hopefully returning again and again. Bringing some of our important local heritage back into productive use is important to all the members of the committee, and these carefully considered plans, working with a defined funding envelope, means a much-loved building will hear and feel the vibrancy it once enjoyed again after being vacant for too long. I would ask the committee to support the application tonight to ensure we can evidence to the government our ability to deliver on what we promised to do, improving our prospects for securing future funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Are there any questions from members of the committee which they would like to ask? Is there anything they don't understand about this application? Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I understand 1852 when Albany Barracks were built. Where does it come under listed buildings? Is it a grade 1, grade 2, 2-star?
Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Yes, it's not actually a listed building, but it is locally listed, and that means that in planning terms, it's a consideration when looking at a planning application. So it's not like a grade 1 or 2 listed building, but it's still important to the character and context of the conservation area.
Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hope with the members that this is a very uncontroversial application and it will receive very broad support. I suspect it might not need a great deal of debate this evening, so I'm going to move immediately to a motion that we approve the officer recommendation on this. I look for a seconder.
Sorry, Councillor Andre is the first person I saw, so I'll take Councillor Andre as a second.
Democracy, remember.
Yeah, Chair, I would like some more debate, please.
Okay.
Right. The one thing that I really do not like about this application is the added bits on what you call the back of the building. They're extremely ugly, and for a really lovely looking building from the north side, you walk round and you see this dreadful monstrosity of glass, etc. And I noticed that in the external works, oh gosh, if I can find it now, they're talking about white blocks replacing some of the existing stuff. This, all right, it might not be a listed building, but it is a beautiful building. It's been ruined enough. And certainly at the moment, the improvements do not come on the south side of the building. Is there anything that we could do to mitigate the impact of those very ugly proposals?
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Would you like to propose perhaps a condition that would meet that kind of concern that you have? I take it you're not going to speak. So, Councillor Brodie, you're next.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I've got no problem with the principle of what's proposed for this building, but like Councillor Churchman, I was very disappointed with what the proposed plans are for what was obviously originally a very attractive building. I mean, it looks dreadful now, and I don't think it's going to look much better in the future. I think you're orientated slightly wrong, but the wall, which is actually on the east side rather than the south side, it looks like, to be honest, the building that is peeping above the very, I think Russell described as the characterful wall, the bit that is peeping above is very unsightly, and I don't think there are any proposals to actually seriously address that so that the wall is enhanced visually to passers-by. At the site visit, I did discuss with Mr. Chick the possibility of that extension at the rear of the building being lowered in height, because I don't think it needs to be that height, and brought down to the level of the wall. It would be interesting. I would be interested if we could possibly amend that side of it. I know we have to deal with the application before us, but if we could have a condition regarding that. I'm also concerned that there are extensions on each side of the new building that are brought right to the front at level with the front of the building. And I don't think that's absolutely necessary, because again, I think that's going to detract from what is as Mr. Chick describes, a characterful building. I just think that there's a missed opportunity. I don't know who's drawn up the plans for this, but I think there's a real missed opportunity to to enhance this building for the future, but yet still be able to have it used by the UKSA to its fullest capacity. To be frank with you, I'm really disappointed, and unless we can do something like that, I would probably vote against this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. That's at least you've got there's a specific suggestion there which we could follow. Any other comments at this point? Or I'll ask maybe Mr. Bolter to comment on where we go with in terms of oh, you stick with Russell. So Russell, can you comment on the suggestions there?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Brady. So in terms of the rear elevation, the proposals are to replace the windows at the back, not to obviously lower that part of the building. We have spoken to the architect about potentially lowering it, but there wouldn't be enough headroom for the use proposed. So the proposal is to have a sort of refectory at the back, because, as the report says, the floor levels in the building need to be raised to make it safe for a flood event, there wouldn't then be the suitable headroom for obviously a building of that size, because you know, a room of that size with that many people in, you couldn't have a low ceiling. It would just be an awful environment to be in. So the proposals wouldn't be to reduce that roof height. So I think the committee has to look at what's in front of you, but of course there can be direction in terms of what treatments are used for those changes at the back. So changing those windows, what sort of things would be acceptable, what wouldn't, in the mind of the committee. That can be included in the conditions which are already there, which require quite a lot of detail in terms of the window changes. In terms of the extensions that are proposed, there will be an extension obviously on the north side, which will come right to the front of the building. That will be the main entrance. But actually what is on the side here will stay as existing. So that's an existing extension which is already there, and the proposal is simply just to change the existing doorway. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Councillor Brodie.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Russell, for that. I mean, I just think in terms of the balance, you know, if you're looking at it from the west side, if that extension on the left was you know, balanced with the right hand side, it would have been helpful, and I don't think it really adds to it at all. In terms of the extension at the back, I understand what you're saying that, about the headroom with taking into account the flood issues, but I don't think we really understand what sort of replacement windows there are going to be there. I mean, I certainly haven't. Have you got anything to show us? Because I mean, it really does need addressing, because it's dreadful at the moment. It really detracts from that very, and I keep using your word because I wrote it down, characterful wall. You probably noticed. Thank you.
Mr. Chick.
Thank you. Yes. So what the elevations show here is that the glazing bars, the number of glazing bars would be reduced. So what you see at the moment on the back is a pretty typical sort of factory-like upper level windows, and the proposal is to reduce the amount of glazing bars. So then what you would see from Maresfield Road would be much more glazing, which hopefully would be a lighter touch compared to what's there at the moment. Now, the conditions already require quite a lot of detail in terms of what those replacement windows are going to be and the glazing bars. And obviously officers, if this was approved, would work hard to get something that was in accordance with the building and also the extension. But obviously if committee has something in mind, then that can be put specifically in the condition to say, you know, what would be preferred. And you know, obviously officers can listen to that and take that into account.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. It's difficult for lay people like us to argue with architects, and I recognise that there's an enormous amount of work being already done on it. But I think everybody who went on that site visit went round the back, saw this and went, ooh. And I think there is a concern that there are other options that are immediately available. I mean, curved glazing or whatever. And there are also an option, and I would have raised it later. There doesn't been a consideration of a flood barrier rather than raising all the floors, which might be cheaper. And the bottom line is we have a wall all the way around. And given that it is a tidal flooding issue that we're facing, that wall will be quite sufficient to hold back a reasonable amount of water anyway. I'm unhappy to be turning anything that really rescues this building down. So I will listen to both planning and colleagues here consideration before I make a decision.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Stewart's observations, I'm very much of a similar mind. I think it's fair to say that we are all well aware of the indices of deprivation and where various places on the island sit within that. Child poverty is a very real issue, and I think it would be I think in terms of bringing this building back into use and the proposed use is an extremely worthy one. I do take on board the issues with the area that has been mentioned. I know that there is mention in the application of solar panels. Can you just clarify, please, Mr. Chick? Was that on the existing part to the left, or is that on the part at the back that we are talking about? Because I think that is, obviously, we are very mindful of sustainability. So that is also a consideration. But I would hope that we can come to, I am very open-minded on this, but I would hope that we can come to a satisfactory consideration, bearing in mind that there are already 21 proposed conditions on this. And I think officers have been very mindful and very thorough that the building, although not listed, being on the local list, is very much of historical significance. But I am minded that we, if possible, we should do everything to try to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Andre. Mr. Chair, can you tell us about the solar power arrangement?
Yes, so it is referred to as an option. I don't think it's a firm proposal at the moment, but I think what the design and access statement refers to is potentially those panels going on that flat roof, because the sunlights that are currently in it, the lanterns, will be changed, and that would potentially give scope for solar panels, which could be put on as potentially permitted development. It may need planning permission. I just want to say one thing on the flood issue, is that the wall that is at the site would not prevent that site from flooding at the moment. In an extreme flood event, the flood waters on the front of the site would be 1.1 metres high. And so you would be looking at taking those railings out, which would be a significant loss to the conservation area, to try and engineer a solution that's already there in front of you. And I think that this is an issue that needs to be balanced with the overall merits of the proposal. Now, you've heard what the Cabinet member has said, you've heard what the Parish Council has said. We haven't got a single objection, not even from consultees. So there are significant positives that are set out in the report to this proposal, which need to be balanced against the changes to the back of the building, which, to be frank, are an existing situation. And so if those changes were deemed unacceptable, you'd be looking at potentially refusing the scheme, because you have to determine what's in front of you, considering all of those benefits of the scheme.
Thank you. I don't see any hands. We have an existing motion to accept the motion. We've had suggestions for conditions, but they haven't been particularly detailed. Are we happy to go ahead now with the main motion? So can I see all those in favour of the motion as it stands then, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Okay, those against, please? And
None.
any abstentions?
None.
Okay, so it's unanimous. So this application has been approved, and we now move on to the third application. I beg your pardon.
Point of order, Chair.
Oh, first of all, to change speakers. So would people like a small break?
Chair, can I raise a point of order if I may? I feel that we have been speaking now we have less than an hour and a half, essentially, until the end of this meeting. I know we have a habit of deferring meetings, which I don't think is something we should necessarily continue. My concern, and I don't think I'd be doing my job for the people of Ryde if I didn't raise this now, is that this is a substantial application, 900 units. I think it will fundamentally change the face of Ryde. And I do have concerns about rushing it through where there won't be necessarily proper time to ventilate discussion. So my concern is that we are not necessarily going to have sufficient time. And I would ask perhaps that you make a ruling or a decision on that if you feel so inclined. Thank you.
I think we need to discuss that. So Councillor Brodie.
Yes. I think I need clarification as well. Is this a different situation from the Westacre Park one, where surprisingly the entire application was before us, but today all that is before us are the reserved matters from the original committee decision to approve Penny Feathers in September 2015, 7.5 years ago. We're not revisiting the entirety of the application in this case, as I understand it, and unless people have got a surprise for me. Thank you, Chair.
I'll ask Ms Wilkinson to respond to that one, Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Yes, in simple answer to that question, the application is as it is before you. It's a reserve matters for the outline previously approved for the site of Penny Feathers. I would say, obviously, committee has a scheduled time from 2 till 7, I believe, and then the ability for an hour extension or an extension after that, 4 hours. So it has from 4 till 7. From 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock, my apologies. I think what I would raise significant concerns about is making a decision at 20 to 6 that we do not have sufficient time to consider an application. If we did that for every committee agenda, we would find ourselves in a significantly difficult situation progressing any applications. If we were to defer this application, it would return to April at the same time as the Westacre application will defer to April, and we are simply moving the matter on to the next agenda. That would be my opinion. So it is obviously up to members to make a decision based on comments of others and colleagues. My advice would be it is a standard planning application that we consider every month. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion, for the suggestion that Councillor Drew has made a suggestion? I don't know if there's any...
It wasn't necessarily a motion, but I did feel that it was something that needed to be raised because, as I say, I take Ms Wilkinson's point. I think, notwithstanding obviously that it is outlined, and I did have concerns, I think, based on what's happened with the previous application with Westacre. I know there's a huge amount to read, and I would say here residents have raised concerns about essentially the interaction of the reports with the huge number of documents on the planning portal and being able to take cognizant appreciation of all of that, and then the interplay with some of the elements which I have no doubt some people will raise. That's the only reason. So I don't necessarily put forward a motion. It was simply for your consideration, Chair.
Thank you very much. I do have a lot of sympathy with what you're saying. Councillor Drew, do you need to change position at this point to the ward member's position? Councillor Lilly.
I just want to actually say that the decision to grant outline planning permission has been made. This is purely, as actually I think referred to, reserve matters, which is the actual what it's going to look like, right? Within that, and I actually think it's important we actually deal with this because Ryder's had this hanging over itself for a very long time. So actually, I would be totally against any kind of deferment. I think we should look at what is in front of us tonight in regards to, you know, does it meet the standard of this committee to actually be decided on? That's what we should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Chairman. A quick observation from me, if I can. As councillors will be aware, the Constitution provides that this meeting lasts for 3 hours from 4 o'clock. So we do run on the duration until 7 o'clock. And so my suggestion is that you proceed with the application as is before you, unless there's any other reason why you feel the item should be deferred. And if at that point, as we approach the 3 hour mark, you'll see me nervously looking at my watch, and I will then be nudging the chairman to take a vote on an extension of time. And if at that moment you felt that the item needed to be carried over to the next available meeting, then you would simply vote against a motion to extend the meeting at that point, and it would end after the 3 hour markers provided in the Constitution. You can do that for any number of reasons, but one of the reasons before you is if you're mindful that the item couldn't be given its proper airing before the committee. So if you felt at that point that you simply couldn't determine the matter this evening, you would simply vote against a motion to extend the time period of the meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Guard. Oh, Councillor Jarman.
I wonder if we could have some just clarification. I know that's not always the easiest thing we get in this committee, but clarification here would assist. When we are looking at these reserved matters, do we apply the policies we have now as a council, or do we apply the policies we had at the time when the outline planning permission was given? Clearly, they are quite different in many regards, including our environmental policies and related ecology, etc. So I just want to make sure that when we debate this and discuss it, we know the benchmark against which we're applying it. And a corollary to that is, if we apply the policies that we have as a council now, knowing that they are different when the original decision was made, does that in any way detract from the holistic nature of the outline decision that was originally made? Thank you.
Councillor Jarman, that's a very good question. Mr. Wilkinson, would you like to try and?
I will answer it, Councillor Redland. In answer to that question, the application, when originally determined at outline stage, was determined under the core strategy. So the local planning policies were the same local planning policies as we are considering the application today. There is no change in the in that side of things. There has been updates to such things as the MPPF, to which the core strategy still falls broadly in line with. Therefore, that is your policy context. The matters that you are considering that have been reserved can be considered in line with any changes. However, you cannot alter the fact that the principle has been accepted. Outline consent has been granted. That cannot be removed. Therefore, irrespective of changes in policy, the principle of building 904 dwellings and associated commercial development on this site has been approved, in line with the other parameters that have been indicated within the outline and the associated highway infrastructure improvement works and everything else. It may be easier for me to do the presentation, and then councillors may have some questions following that in terms of the particulars about what the considerations are. But certainly, in terms of the policy framework, we remain as the core strategy as we were when the original application was determined.
Thank you, it's very clear.
So just to clarify my understanding of the answer. So I understand we're not seeking to go behind the original decision here. The question was, do we apply the policies that we have as a council now? So for example, our policies regarding zero carbon targets and environmental targets, etc., those are as they are now, or as they were back in 2013, 14, 15, as this debate unfolded?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure Mr. Bolton may wish to step in, but I would highlight those targets and those policies to which you refer are council policies, not planning policies. The decision must be made in line with planning policy only, and not council policies. Those council policies will be worked into, I presume I'm correct in saying, the IPS, the Island Planning Strategy, which is the revised policies that will be that we are looking to produce, but they are not the current policies that any decision should be made in light of.
I'd like to let Mr. Wilkinson give the presentation now on the application, and then hear the other speakers, because we don't normally have this kind of chat about policy. So are you ready now to do the main act?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, councillors will be aware of the application site, but I will go through some locational plans for ease of reference. You do have a detailed report in front of you, so I will be limited in what I say, and a lot of these slides will simply be visuals that I will show you, because a lot of the matters we're considering is appearance and scale, and I don't need to talk at you for those. I will let you view the plans if you haven't already looked at them yourselves. The site is an area of 52.6 hectares, I should say. It runs between Westridge Cross to the north, Busy Bee to the south, with the exception of the area, the footpath that runs down to the cricket club, for those that are aware of it, on Hardings Shoot, I believe that's called. You've then got the railway line running to the west, with the exception of 2 pieces of land that sit the opposite side of the railway line that provide open space as part of the development. We will look at them in more detail later, but for locational purposes, that is your site. What is in front of members this afternoon is the Reserve Matters application for 904 dwellings and 5,030 square metres of commercial floor space. Those matters that are to be considered are access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. However, certain parameters were set at outline stage. Those indicated those areas that would be built form, which effectively follow the phases that you can see in that plan. Those areas that would be open space and what that open space would provide, as well as the highway junction improvements on the network, which we will go into a bit later. There is a phasing plan as part of the application, and you will note the report has been written following this phasing plan, and a copy of the plan has been provided in page 64 of the report for councillors' attention for ease of reference for any other than that. What I will do in the presentation is effectively work through each phase, showing a more detailed layout of that phase and some of the key buildings and street scenes that are incorporated within that phase. What I thought would be helpful first in terms of the design principles and ethos of the application, and many times in the report you will have read me refer to Regency architecture and incorporating features that are seen in the local area, including I've referred to Lind Hill and Lind Street a number of times in the report. The outline application, in terms of indicating the type of principle that we'd be looking at in terms of design, incorporate a number of photographs, which I've just incorporated in these 2 slides, that shows those kind of features that the application's taken cues from in terms of the design development of the scheme, with the incorporation of bay windows and kind of flat-fronted buildings and a range of different styles and types. So they are just some images of the local area that have been incorporated into the design principles of the scheme. Moving through in terms of the layout, because of the scale of phase 3, this is a number of plans that show the separate elements of phase 1. Apologies, I believe I just said phase 3. Phase 1 in itself incorporates 123 residential units, and those being within this area here. It then includes various kind of public open space areas as part of the development that are referred to as different things in the report. You've got the orchard, which is this area. You've got the water garden that runs down here. You've also got Pennyfeathers Park, which is the large area which was split between 2 plans, so bear with me on that one. As well as areas of the ride, which is the route down to the down to the cricket club, the walk, which is an area of open space on the other side of the railway line. Again, I've got a plan for that in a moment. 3 Trees Field, which is a large field with 3 trees in it. We will come to that later. As well as the commercial buildings. This is commercial building 1 and the energy centre. I will show you plans of the other commercial buildings as we move through. It does also include commercial buildings 2, 3 and 4 as part of phase 1. I felt this was probably quite a useful slide to incorporate, which shows the main, what we call the landmark building on the corner of the Coathy Way roundabout, which is on the new access into the site from Brading Road. That is seen as one of the largest of the buildings on site. The outline consent indicated that there would be kind of three-storey buildings in the main, and then landmark buildings could go up to 4-storey. And this shows one of those proposed landmark buildings, which would be split as part of the development. And as stated in the report, that follows a kind of a Regency style design. I've also included images of some of the properties as you move down that access road. So as you come down, you've got the landmark building in the corner, then you'd work down the hill with some more simple elevational treatment terraces. These show some other street scenes within the application. There are a significant number of different building types and design types as part of the layout for this application. I think each individual unit has an individual design because it has to work with the levels of the site. So because of that, I thought the easiest way to show councillors the designs that are proposed was to show them as these street scenes, which show you the detail of each of the units as they move through the site. And again, in slightly more detail, those proposed units, a range of 2 and 3 bedrooms in 2 and 3 stories, apologies, in the main. As stated, this element of the scheme also includes the commercial building 1, which is at the top of the slide here, as well as the energy centre, which is shown here. Councillors will note there is a higher element of the energy centre which would incorporate the flue effectively as part of that building that has been designed into the building. As outlined in the report, the commercial buildings on their front elevations have features that tie them to the more residential developments with the scored render and glazing in order that they could be functional, but also don't necessarily appear as kind of industrial buildings. They've got a more commercial look. They would incorporate offices and various other facilities. That, as stated earlier, this phase also includes commercial buildings 2, 3 and 4, which sit on the plan as you see them. Commercial building 3, which is at the point of the cursor, does propose a car showroom, which would provide a replacement facility for Westridge Garage, which is at the corner of Westridge, members will know it, at Westridge Junction, and that would be relocated as part of the application. These images showing, sorry, here. Oh, sorry, let me make that red. Bear with me. There. Apologies. So commercial building 3 would provide a replacement for Westridge Garage, which is to be relocated. These images show some of those commercial buildings, the larger of the 3 buildings being Westridge Garage to accommodate the sales area as well as the MOT testing and the garage elements of that as a scheme. Again, these units are similar, the design of these commercial units is similar to commercial unit 1 and the energy centre. Earlier, I mentioned the fact that this element of the scheme also incorporated the walk, or what is referred to in the report as the walk. This is that, which is an area of public open space, the other side of the railway line and the footbridge, which provides an area of publicly accessible open space as part of the development. And there is the Pennyfeathers Field, which also provides an area of open space that would effectively be used with the walk as well for various rewilding and ecological enhancements and habitats as part of the development. I've incorporated plans side by side of these just to show, and I appreciate, councillors, you won't be able to read the writing on these slides. In essence, they are indicating the different planting schedules that have come forward as part of the ecological enhancements and landscape that is being proposed as part of this application. Where councillors, you see these pink stars on the plans, you will see them as we go through various of the open space plans. They are trim trail markers, so they show kind of children's play areas effectively along routes, so to encourage walking and activities as you go along those walks there as part of a trim trail to encourage recreational activity on site. It's part of the SPA mitigation in order to move those walks away from the seafront and encourage recreational activity in this area for visitors, residents and the existing residents of Ryde. This plan is a split plan showing the extent of the Ryde, which takes a recreational route from the site down to Harding Shoot and the cricket club. Moving on to phase 2, this is more straightforward in terms of its content. This proposes 205 dwellings. The upper street scene of this phase is a mirror of the lower street scene, as it were, of phase 1, providing those landmark buildings and the terrace units. Councils will note in the report I refer to a hub area in the centre, which is a group of flats around a public open space. I have further plans of that in a moment, but again, the street scenes showing the type of design concept that would be utilised through the site and through the development. in on the screen. And then that area, again, I've picked out this area to provide a little bit more detail in relation to the open space, the LEAP, the locally equipped area of play that would sit in the centre of the flatter development. This flatter development taking those cues from the other kind of residential flatter development and Regency properties that are seen in Ryde. Moving on to phase 3. This would provide 195 units as well as the community building and the school land. The report references the flats in detail, references the flats that are proposed on the roundabout, on the new roundabout here. And what councillors will also note is the relocation of Spalbrook Lane as part of this, as part of the development. It would come forward as part of earlier phase, but effectively, if I can get the cursor to work, members, councillors will see that the Smallbrook Lane would divert into the site along here, joining this proposed roundabout, and then join at Great Preston Road at this point, in order that the existing Smallbrook Lane from the bridge up to the up to Great Preston Road would provide a cycle track, or what's being referred to as Greenway. The proposal incorporates a commercial building at the point of the cursor, and to the west of this would be land set aside for the school as provided within the outline application. And councillors will note from that plan, you can see there is also a proposed mugger in that area, multi-use games area, which could be used by both the school and the community centre. Again, I provided some slides showing the designs proposed for the units in this phase within those street scenes. And then I have extracted some more detailed images of the proposed flatter development that is on that roundabout. It's referred to in detail in the report. Councillors will note that there was originally concerns by Island Roads in relation to where the parking was for these units. The parking is actually under the building. So you'll see from the floor plan I've incorporated at the bottom that actually the buildings are linked at lower ground floor level, and that would all provide undercroft parking with an access through. You've got 2 access points in essence, and then the flats would sit above those on the existing land. The existing land levels allow for that split, and you could also see a cross section there that provides that detail. So those units would all have parking. So just to clarify, that was one of the points raised by Island Roads. Those units do have car parking, they are under the buildings and they are linked at that lower ground floor level to provide that car parking. Here. Oh, if I can get them there. Oh, if I can get the red dot to stop moving at the point of the cursor, Councillor Churchman. The community centre building, the plans on screen show the community centre building. As outlined in the report, it has a number of curved roofs, so it looks distinctly different from the residential development. So it is eligible as a different building, as a community building. The height differences created by the wave effectively allows for a sports hall to be incorporated within that building. So what councillors can see as part of this plan is that ground floor layout, which shows the sports hall within the building, which obviously requires slightly higher headroom, and then the remaining space which provide changing facilities, toilets, offices, store, cafe area, as well as a kind of community policing area or a room that can be used for, I believe the outline referred to it as kind of a polyclinic. So you could have a chiropractor in there one day, you could have a nurse practitioner in the next day to provide that community outreach service. Moving on to phase 4, this would provide 128 residential units. And the report references one of the key features within this phase being the Mews, which runs through the centre of the site, again with a locally equipped play area in the centre, or local area of play, I should say. It's not equipped, it's a local area of play. And then some features, so street scenes showing the type of designs that are proposed within this phase. Again, and then more detail of that Muse feature through the centre of the site with the local area of play at the bottom of that feature. What that has been designed to allow for, if I flick back to this, is councillors, you will note that through the design and the pre-application discussions, there's specifically been a gap retained in between these units, so that Muse can provide views straight through the centre to the water garden and some of the open space. So you've got a vista through the site in that location. So the buildings have been carefully positioned to make sure that you can see open space when you're in more built up areas of the site. Moving back through, we then get to phase 5, which would incorporate a 91 units. It's one of the smallest phases of the development in a parallel form. So each phase, in your note, I've referred to this in the report, and councillors, you would have seen it from the layouts. Each phase has a slightly different character and a slightly different feature in order that there is legibility within the wider site. So if you're in one part of the site, you feel that you're in a space and a place. So in order to ensure placemaking, each area has slightly different key features, which I've tried to kind of highlight through the plans and reference within the report. To the south of this phase, you will note the appropriately termed Three Trees Field. And the proposed units at the south of this phase and the north of phase 6, which we will get to in a moment, overlook that area of open space and provide that natural surveillance into that open space area. The report also, members will recall, references some slightly different design units within this part of the development, which are the point of the cursor, which takes a slightly different, more contemporary approach, taking cues from other areas of Ryde than just the kind of Regency style. Again, some street scenes incorporated, and the more contemporary buildings seen in the lower section of those cross sections and those street scenes. What councillors will note from these street scenes is the land level difference within this part of the site. The whole site has quite a steep land drop. Councillors would have noted that on site. What these street scenes do is show the relationship between the dwellings, taking note of that street scene and how they've been designed to step down those hills. Apologies. Again, some street scenes. And then just drawing out some details of that central area where you have the units that are the slightly more contemporary appearance with the slight roof detail to give a kind of roof garden, and then the more traditional units that look onto Three Trees Field. We then move to phase 6, which will provide 162 units, and again a slightly different layout, taking a slightly different place and space feeling about it. Again, though, with those units that mirror the units to the north that provide natural surveillance onto Three Trees Field. The key features within this phase are the large platted development within this part of the site. Again, that I have some more detailed plans of to show you how that would sit within the context of this phase. Some street scenes, again, showing that design principle. And then some more details of this element of the scheme and this U-shaped building, which I refer to in the report. And what I wanted to show as part of this plan is that obviously the report refers to this slightly elevated garden with the parking that was provided within the understory of that building to effectively hide the cars and allow for a greater area of open space. So where you see this central square as part of the floor, the layout plan, that would provide effectively a plateau to provide a garden area with the parking provided under that, making use of those levels within this area. Again, you can see from the cross section here that there is quite a level difference between the site, and here you have some cross sections showing that undercross car parking as you cut through the building. Apologies that I'm struggling to control the cursor a little. Hopefully, councillors, you are following. We then move to the final phase, phase 7, which would incorporate commercial building 5, which is in the location of the current Westridge Garage, which would be on that corner of Westridge Cross. That's the main nature of the layout of the development and its different elements, and then some visuals of that commercial building 5, which is very similar in design to the other and scale to the other commercial buildings proposed. I've incorporated 2 plans now, which I appreciate, councillors, you will not be able to read based on this slide because there is a lot of detail on them. But one of the matters for consideration is landscaping. That has been considered by the council's ecologist and the council's tree officer. Their comments are incorporated in the report. Both are very satisfied with the level of landscaping that is proposed. And I thought this plan would be useful to show that landscaping detail that we've received, and the details in terms of all that planting that would be incorporated in the scheme, incorporating a large amount of street tree planting, which would fall in line with the updated NPPF in terms of street trees and additional features of landscaping such as that. Again, showing the other section of the site to provide the details of the landscaping, the areas of rear gardens that would be grassed, and then the small areas of shrub planting at the front of units. A number of the units, councillors, you'll see from the layout, have defendable space at the front. It's referred to in the report, which provides small areas to allow for ground level planting to just add that bit of green to the street scene. I've also incorporated this plan as something that was discussed on site, I believe, in terms of the Monkton Mead Management Plan and Mitigation and Enhancement Management Plan, which incorporates the 2 areas of open space on the opposite side of the railway line and the Monkton Mead itself, as well as a buffer zone that runs along the side of that river, or that stream, that Monkton Mead. The aims of that strategy effectively being set out with there's significant detail that's been submitted with the application. But I know it's a point that was asked about and that has been questioned, so I thought it might be useful just to provide more detailed plan in terms of that area. So if councillors can note, there's a yellow hatching that runs along the line of the river, which is the buffer zone that's been incorporated to protect the Monkton Mead from development, and with development set outside that 15-metre buffer zone. And you then have the 2 areas of land, the other side of the river and the railway line, that provide that additional enhancement landscaping. I've also thought this plan may be useful, which, apologies that it is quite busy, but the aim of this plan is to show the pedestrian routes through the site in blue, and the cycle routes shown in the magenta, I guess you'd call that. And councillors will note in the report, I refer to the links to the local cycling and walking strategy for this area, which incorporates a link that runs along at the point of the cursor, which could then be extended effectively into the development by way of the not only the diversion of Smallbrook Lane and the provision of the greenway that runs along the existing route of Smallbrook Lane, but also through the internal cycle networks that run north, south, east and west through the site, as well as the strategy indicating the desire for a route running along Brading Road, which you can see from this slide that the proposal incorporates such a route to run north to south and the edge of the development. So I thought that plan might be useful to show that the network of links that are proposed as part of the development. I've also included for information of councillors, because I do think it's pertinent to considerations, because as one of the reserve matters, access is to be considered, but that has to be considered in light of the approval elements of the outline. What the outline required as part of the Section 106 agreement was a list of junction works, and those junction works incorporate their plans. These plans are extracted from the legal agreement, so they're not plans that have been submitted with this application. They are plans that were incorporated. You can see where the signatures have been redacted, incorporated as part of the legal agreement. So the legal agreement incorporates plans for this junction, which is the junction of Breakfaston Road, as well as Westridge Cross, as well as the entrance into the roundabout into Coathy Way. The legal agreement requires that those highway works are undertaken. So although access is to be considered, it has to be considered in light of the already approved highway works that have been detailed as part of the Section 106 agreement as part of that outline consent. So I thought it would be useful to provide some details of those, because it is relevant to the comments that Island Roads have reviewed in terms of those junctions and in relation to the considerations of access. And that's it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Wilkinson. Councillor Churchman.
Sorry, on the corner where the current Westridge garage is, I'm not quite sure what happens. I know Westridge garage is moving, but what are those things on the side? If you go back to, yes, what are they?
So through the Chairman, if I may, that is commercial building 5. So that would be a commercial building. The areas behind that is shown, that is parking for that commercial building, and the remaining area would be open space.
Yes, because the enclosed cemetery.
And that's here.
Yeah, it's
So
just, that's where the trees are, aren't
Yes,
Yeah,
yep,
that's
absolutely.
enclosed cemetery. Next question. On the opposite corner at the moment, we have 2 derelict houses on at the traffic lights. Will they be will they now get demolished to make way for the bigger junction? I think the council bought them a long time ago, didn't they?
Through the Chairman, the council do not own them. I'm afraid we never purchased them. They are owned by Pennyfeathers. They are owned by the applicant or as one of the parties as part of the development. Ultimately the land would be as shown on this plan, which is the outline plan attached to the legal agreement that showed the highway works. Effectively shows works within the areas of the edges of those buildings. The works don't require the buildings to be demolished. You can see there's quite a large area of land between where the road works would end and where the buildings currently sit. But they don't form part of the highway work requirements. The land around the edge of them do. But one would presume at the point in which they work on that, those buildings would be replaced. They are an asset to the developer, but they don't form part of this submission in terms of their replacement.
My next question is the railway line. It's very difficult to see where the railway line is at the bottom. Will there be any footbridges or crossings on that railway line? Because if you're going to have an estate that big, I can see kids playing on the line, etc. Are they going to, has this been taken into account, the safety aspect and the ability to cross? Because Smallbrook Stadium, if you cross the railway line, will be very accessible.
Absolutely, thank you, Chairman. If members can bear with me one moment, I will find you a couple of plans that will help with viewing that element. I can pull them up quite easily, but in essence, yes, the application incorporates an underpass that would cross from south to north effectively, which would cross the Smallbrook Lane. It also includes a pedestrian bridge that would run alongside the existing road bridge that would provide a link over so that pedestrians don't have to walk in onto the existing road bridge to go up Smallbrook Lane.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms Wilkinson. Well, I'd like to now invite Mrs Jenny Wade as part of the objectors to speak for 6 minutes, please, Ms Wade.
Thank you. It may surprise you to know I am not against house building on this site. What I am fearful of is the adoption of a poorly designed, mediocre development which would be built at the expense of its inhabitants and the surrounding area. The success of this scheme depends upon ensuring the viability of the infrastructure and its ability to cope. Is Pennyfeathers really as sustainable as the LPA would like us all to believe? Are you certain it passes the deliverability test? The developer remains a well-hidden and unknown quantity. What is their financial probity? Has the legal department scrutinised and reviewed the Section 106 agreement signed in August 2017? As new roads and junctions need to be created and some existing ones greatly altered, Clarification of the exact timetable is needed, but is all third-party land within the developer's gift to deliver within 2 years. Westridge Garage is integral to road widening at Westridge Cross. Can the planning officer confirm if the owner is vacating? To comply with the Section 106 agreement, these various highway improvements have to be completed prior to the occupation of no more than 260 dwellings. In the 7.5 years since outline approval was given, the government has announced gas boilers are to be phased out by 2030. Has the LPA been dangerously lenient, allowing the current proposal of a gas-fired energy centre to stand? Greenfield Nordic are listed in the construction management plan, but have categorically stated they are not involved in this development. What's the fire officer's view, as this is to be built alongside Westridge Garage? Reference is made to fostering well-designed, beautiful and safe places, which will support a strong, vibrant and healthy community. But do multiple blocks of flats up to 4 stories high and hidden behind a mock Georgian facade really meet the brief? This is not Central Ryde. In order to get 904 dwellings into the buildable space, what's the ratio of flats to houses? Can we be told? Post-pandemic, what people want is properties with their own private outside space. The flats might be designed to look like houses, but that is where it ends. Could it be it's only if density is kept this high that Pennyfeathers remains financially viable to the developer? What are Pennyfeathers' green credentials? Electric car charging points, have any been incorporated? What about solar panels on all properties? Is their absence because of the Manco and the CHP Energy Centre? Rainwater butts, will these be fitted to every property? When will the Manco be set up? All residents, whether they rent or own, will have to pay an annual fee to it and buy their heating and power from it. And until regulated by government, they are free to set their own uncapped tariffs. Can our GPs, dentists and solitary hospital cope, or the schools, until it's decided whether to build a new one here or not? But is the new school site suitable because of drainage? The primary school and community centre have been moved much further into the development. We're told it's so better surroundings can be offered with increased parking, but aren't we supposed to be discouraging the use of private motor vehicles? The school and nursery places have to be offered to neighbouring areas as well as to Pennyfeathers residents. How easy will it be for small pupils and parents to safely reach the new location? Where are the safe pedestrian crossings and the new bus stops? Will Southern Vectis reroute the number 2 and 3 buses? Will Smallbrook Holt become a permanent station? Good public transport links are essential. Will Southern Water's infrastructure cope? Can you be certain stormwater sewage discharges won't increase, even in the short term, into the seas all around our beautiful island? Numerous objections have been raised, but many would argue not taken notice of. It's nearly 9 years since the developer directly engaged with the local community. New housing is needed, but it must be deliverable, sustainable, well-designed, and of the type that people need. A development of this magnitude, if not right, won't easily integrate. There are currently over 1,500 new dwellings in the system for Ryde East, plus Nicholson Road's business park expansion, which will see that more than double in size. The public wants, and you councillors are entitled to demand, absolute clarity and certainty, not a mediocre attempt to achieve a speculative business transaction at the expense of the community. If you have any doubts regarding the deliverability of this application, please don't approve it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wade. You've raised a lot of questions there. Unfortunately, we haven't got time to answer them specifically. We need to run through the various different speakers, but I hope other members will bring up some of your points late in the debate. Thank you. Is it Councillor Simon Cook? Councillor Simon Cook, representing Ryde Town Council. Please, 6 minutes, please. You put your microphone on, Mr. Cook. That's the one.
Okay, right. After a seemingly never-ending delay, the spectre of Pennyfeathers appears before us again. For years, it has haunted the town, causing widespread stress and anxiety for residents. Ryde Town Council has repeatedly ejected this application in the strongest possible terms. We argue it is a deeply flawed and outdated proposal which we believe to be neither desirable nor deliverable. In the 6 minutes I have, it is impossible for me to go through all of our objections. A summary of concerns is contained within pages 55 to 57 of the report, and I urge members to read them thoroughly. I'll briefly highlight a few of our objections now. Firstly, it beggars belief that such scant regard has been given to the environment. There is no mention of this island state as a UNESCO biosphere and nothing regarding light pollution or any possible mitigation. It is unclear whether the open space in the western part of the development would be available to the general public, and we have serious concerns about access to bus stops as well as cycling and walking infrastructure. The relocation of the school to what we consider a less suitable site will also have a negative impact in terms of poor transport links. But most egregious of all is the gas-powered energy centre. In just 2 years' time, gas boilers will be banned from newly built houses in order to help the country hit its net zero emissions target by 2050. Given this council's own laudable net zero goals, it seems complete madness to approve a scheme which is clearly outdated and actually goes backwards in that regard. What sort of a message does that convey or example does it set? There is also a lack of clarity and detail regarding this energy centre. According to the S106 agreement, it should be constructed before the 250th dwelling, yet the officer report suggests it would be built in phase 1. There are no operational details. There is also no mention of it in the latest construction management plan. Secondly, this whole scheme is dependent on significant highway infrastructure improvements throughout the surrounding area. We have little to no confidence that these works can be delivered. Of particular concern is the Westridge Cross junction, which is vital to the scheme. Indeed, it is also pivotal to the Westacre Park development. On that application, an objection was raised because the developers relied on third-party land. The objector suggested that the application be refused, and I quote, "Appropriate agreed highway improvements cannot come forward without the agreement of third parties who own land outside the control of the applicant." At our planning meeting for this application last year, the owner of Westridge Garage stated that he has not and will not consent to this scheme. Indeed, it has come to my attention that there is a live conflicting application on that land to build housing between the garage and St John's Graveyard on Great Preston Road. So clearly, this scheme also relies on third-party land at that junction that it does not control. The objector in question to that WAP scheme was Mr Hepburn, writing on behalf of Pennyfeathers. They own the 2 corner plots at Westridge where the properties have been left to decay and have been a prominent eyesore for many years. I suggest you take Mr Hepburn's sage guidance and refuse this application for the very reasons he himself argued. This neatly highlights the lack of cohesion concerning land ownership as well as the confusing legalities of this scheme. There are multiple landowners, some who are clearly not consenting. Companies that were created and were signatories to the S10 agreement have since been dissolved. No one has any clear idea of who is actually behind this proposed development, and there's no actual developer attached who will build the housing. There is a level of secrecy and uncertainty which is entirely unacceptable for a housing development of this size. I would go so far to say that it is farcical and a very sad indictment of our extremely broken planning system that is even being considered, let alone being recommended for approval. There is widespread anger in our community that this awful development has been hanging over our heads for so many years. There has been no meaningful consultation or engagement with RTC or the wider community, which is appalling for what will be the largest housing development in Ryde for generations. This is an attempt to ride roughshod over best practice and basic decency. Yes, we need housing, but the right type, with the right infrastructure and in the right place. This ticks none of these boxes. Despite having a mind-numbing 1,000 or so documents, this application lacks such basic information as to how many affordable houses will be built in which phase, no details on the proposed management of any social housing, and RTC is not aware of any approaches that have been made to any existing housing associations. Finally, we urge the committee to refuse this application and to make it clear that such a shoddy, outdated and ill thought out development is unacceptable for our community, our town and our island. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Councillor Cook. I'd now like to move on to Mr. Glenn Hepburn, speaking on behalf of the applicant agent.
Thank you, Chairman. The existing outline plan permission and associated Section 106 agreement set the framework for the application before members tonight. Tonight's deliberation is not to grant planning permission, as that already exists, but to make sure that the details we have submitted are in line with the intent and the direction of the outline planning permission. That is, the matters that have been reserved for later consideration. Time and time again, and sometimes rightly so, we hear that not enough infrastructure is provided, and accordingly the development is very selfish by only looking after its own interests. To combat this view, and as you may expect, I'm now going to go through a list of the benefits of this scheme, which I am confident that no other scheme on the island has brought forward in the last 25 years. Over 300 affordable housing units, fully policy compliant and not negotiated down. 4,000 square metres of employment floor space, accompanied by an agreed skills and labour plan for local employment, ensuring local jobs for local people and for school leavers seeking apprenticeships. Provision, if necessary, of a primary school and a contribution of 2.3 million for education purposes in the Ryde area. Now in a more sustainable location and accessible, close to the footpath and cycle network. That's why it's moved to the west. Contributions to sports facilities at Smallbrook Stadium, and importantly providing footpaths and cycleways away from roads. In fact, 6.5 kilometres of cycleways linking existing and future nodes of activities. That is schools, a community centre, shops and onward travel to Ryde Town Centre. All of which are compliant with the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan that this council is advancing. Surface water being retained on site, doubling up as safe spaces of interest in nature conservation. No more water falls on the site because it's developed. This gives an opportunity for water, rainwater, floodwater to be controlled. That doesn't exist at the moment. There will be no tripping of foul water into areas of SPA because the foul water will be going directly to Sandown. I think that's been conditioned on the suggested conditions. A country park for all the public. Of the 52 hectare site in front of us, 46% is open space, 60 acres in old money. That is substantial. This includes fully equipped children's play areas, a mugger, as we heard, managed woodland and circular footpaths, which in turn will encourage dog walkers away from more sensitive SPA mitigation areas. Substantial rebuilding and improving failing road junctions that are close to capacity. This includes Westridge, who have exchanged contracts, so they're sold to the developers, and will allow safe passage for buses and pedestrians. This list is not just the work of the applicants, but also that generated by public participation, presentation to and for the Town Council, Island Roads and other statutory undertakers. Not to forget, of course, the planning officers on behalf of the Planning Authority. It has been and remains an agreed approach. Turning specifically to affordable housing, which is generated by the open market housing, it can be quite easy to get muddled with facts and figures and various reports such as housing needs assessments and delivery tests, etc. But really the proof is still in the pudding. 2,500 local people on the island on the housing register, increasing year on year. Currently, there's one affordable unit for rent in Ryde. Analysts of the 18 properties let this year shows each of these properties has been chased by 119 people in the highest need category. Finally, Chairman, this scheme before members tonight will provide all the benefits shown above, but also allow local families and others in need to access more modern, comfortable and appropriate housing controlled by a social landlord. Just as a point of reference, there'll be no gas boilers in any of the units. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hepburn. That was very useful. I'd like to ask the local ward member, Councillor Warren Drew, to speak. Or I don't know if there's any time limit for you, Councillor Drew.
I believe as a committee member, it's unlimited. Thank you, Chair. So to echo Mrs. Wade, whose contributions to RIDE are extensive, I'll start by saying that we do undoubtedly need housing. There is no question about that, particularly in RIDE, particularly where so many private landlords have exited the market. But it needs to be the right type of housing. It needs to contribute to the island. Now, I won't rehearse all of the issues that Mrs. Wade and others have raised, but they are undoubtedly worthy of discussion tonight. Indeed, they must. I do have significant concerns about some of the details of this application. But by way of a précis of some of the most concerning, I want to start with roads and infrastructure. Now, Island Roads have previously recommended refusal. Now, I fully appreciate that the impact of the units on existing infrastructure was a matter for the outline decision and the Section 106 agreement. However, I would assert that the way in which the design of traffic safety and mitigation measures directly connected with the detail of this application is something that does squarely fall into the discussion tonight. Now, it would appear that there are few details by way of outline in terms of highway capacity. No modelling seems to be undertaken. So as regards that wider point, that of the general impact on the network, it's clearly the case that the detailed design stage, that is, I would submit, part of the discussion tonight, does not really address this point. And also, I think we need to take it on balance because it's clearly the type of housing and the mix it engages refers to issues of demographic. The type of housing will have an impact on the way in which this development is used. A one-bedroom socially rented occupied does not, for example, tend to drive a polluting Chelsea tractor on the school run. The ability to conveniently and safely explore one's neighbourhood, I would suggest, is fundamental. It's reflected in the fact that it is such a material planning consideration. Now, as we know, this development is outside of the settlement boundary. Now, although that would have been a matter for the initial outline permission, I suggest it does raise the threshold tonight for adequately demonstrating that the design and layout contributes to the amenity of residents and the surrounding area. I believe we've had tonight a supplementary document in relation to Junction B, Smallbrook Lane, Great Preston Road. I'm going on what is in the report, which is Island Road's letter of the 16th of March at page 12. Now, this is just to give an example of some of the concerns that I don't think have been addressed and I think are worthy of further ventilation. Now, this is in relation to drawing 6400, so that's Smallbrook Lane, Great Preston Road. And it's, I suppose, potentially an obtruse point about vehicle articulation in which manoeuvres can be made safely. Now, Island Roads say it is noted that these type of manoeuvres accessing the junction would occur infrequently and that they could be deemed safe by essentially waiting for the opposite flow of traffic, making that manoeuvre. However, Island Roads do say, and I quote, "This office deems this as a highway safety concern. It is at the discretion of the LPA how much weight they apportion to this comment." Now, I would suggest when it comes to safety that we apportion a great deal of weight, and I would suggest that it is indicative. Some of the comments that others have raised, Ryde Town Council and Mr. Cook, regarding the failure to engage with Ryde Town Council and residents about these signal issues, I think are concerning. I think equally in the point that was ventilated, we've had on a slip of paper about queuing lanes and such. And again, I think that also goes to this issue. Now, paragraph 111 of the NPPF provides that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impact would be severe. Now, that's clearly a matter for our individual weighing, or rather the committees tonight. But I do think that something needs to be put in place further, and we do need more information. I don't think, as things stand, we can make a meaningful determination. I think that cumulative impact will be severe. As you would have noted in the report, there is an acknowledgement that that cumulative impact of RIDE, several new developments, is going to exacerbate problems, we also need to regard that within the 15 years potentially, within which this quite extensive application might take to deliver. The context in which that will occur, it could change quite significantly. At page 74 of the report, at paragraph 7.74, it states since the outline was approved, further developments have been consented. We have resolutions in grant of the vicinity of that site, including Hope Road, Westacre potentially, and Nicholson Road. As a result, the council, in its role as a highways authority and planning authority, has commissioned consultants to undertake a review of junction improvement options within the Ryde East area. Now, I don't think we have that information, but I would suggest that it is of vital importance that we do. The report goes on to say it is for the council to adopt suitable junction designs and lead that to delivery at an appropriate time. And I think that time, frankly, is now. I think we need to have more detail with regards to this wider impact. And I appreciate tonight it's on a very narrow consideration. We have approved this. Going then to affordable housing. DM4 of the local plan requires that the developer demonstrate how the proposals benefit the community. Now, although the current application posits 35% affordable housing in phase 1, this is subject to point 4 of DM4, and that is essentially that it falls to a balancing exercise. It has to be reasonable in the context. And I would suggest here that affordable housing needs to be made up largely of socially rented accommodation. If this is going to be approved, if Ryde is going to deal with some of the issues which would undoubtedly emanate from it, it has to be to the benefit of young people. It's what the island need, it's what young people need. In my estimation, it's really the only way that these proposals, when taken on balance, can benefit the community. To do anything else is to sell this community for too low a price into the profit of developers. Now, the first phase allocates 24% affordable rent and 11% shared ownership. So I think we're all probably of a similar mind that an 80% reduction on market prices is not affordable. It's not affordable in general, particularly to young island residents. Almost half the units in this development are 3 and 4 bedrooms. I would suggest that we do not need 4-bedroom properties. If they are to be included, and I appreciate that they are clearly the most profitable form of housing for developers, then it must be to realistically provide the economic basis for offering socially rented accommodation to make a meaningful difference to our community. Now, policy DM3 of the core plan provides for a balanced mix of housing. The definition of balance must, in my view, be determined in context in relation to local need. In Ryde, that local need is extensive. There are many private landlords, as I say, who've exited the market. So as things stand, with the current allocations, the current mix of housing, I don't think it does benefit the community, and I would suggest perhaps the committee might be able to ventilate some of those issues in its discussion tonight. With regards to amenity and the design of the space, I don't have any particular qualms, save those which have been reflected in the report with regards to policing. Now, I think when an independent third party is making quite trenchant concerns about policing, and those are in the report somewhat disregarded by officers, I think that is something we need to look at. I appreciate there are concerns with density, and this clearly needs to be economically viable, but it cannot be at the expense of social issues in Ryde, of which we have many. The design has been chosen to maximize space and profit, not safety, not the integration of the community. There hasn't really been any meaningful discussion, I would suggest. With regards to the environment, now I think some of the issues which have been raised by Mr. Cook and Mrs. Wade, I'm not going to rehearse those again, but I do think with regards to Southern Water, now we know, and it says in the report at page 77 at paragraph 7.95, the foul drainage information has been considered by Southern Water, who have outlined that no discharge into the public system should take place until off-site drainage works to provide sufficient capacity within the foul network are complete. Now, I appreciate that that is not a material planning consideration, but I do think it's something that needs further discussion. That should is doing quite a lot of work in that sentence. And I believe that this is a wider issue in regards to our island. And of course, as a committee, that is what needs to be ventilated. It's not just about Ryde, it is also the benefits of the community in general. My final point is also, I think, one that has been alluded to, but it's the time that this has taken to come before us. And it's also the time that it will take to deliver these many, many phases. Now, this has already been essentially one generation of Ryde resident. By the time it's completed, it's going to be two. We have seen recently how quickly things change, the way in which we use housing, the way in which we use transport has changed dramatically. And I'm concerned that because of the nature of this 900 plus units and the mixture is going to change Ryde, which is a gateway town to the Isle of Wight. And it will therefore engage some of the policy considerations with regards to employment if it's having a deleterious impact on the way in which tourism, which is the lifeblood of the island, is utilised. So for those reasons and others, I would urge the committee to give this very careful scrutiny. I appreciate the outline has been given. I would ask you to particularly look at the issue and the balance of affordable accommodation. And I would certainly suggest that there are other points which could be discussed, which are going to be difficult to because of a lack of information and that time frame. And I think that is really key here. 15 years potentially to deliver this. It's already taken essentially a decade. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Drew. That draws all the outside presentations to an end. So normally we start with, are there any questions that any members of the committee would like to ask?
Chair, before you start, can I suggest we have a comfort break? And perhaps we should also vote for an extension. I would formally propose an extension by 1 hour to 8 p.m. this evening. For a second.
If people are happy with that idea, I'm quite, I don't really mind. We'd say, what we'd say, 5 minutes break. Okay, so it's now, that'll be coming back at 10 to 7.
Sorry, just so we're extension to that goes for.
Oh, do we want to take a vote on the extension of the meeting from 1 hour?
From 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. Yeah.
Can I see those in favour of an extension of the meeting for an extra hour if necessary? And those against the extension? Those, any abstentions? Oh, that was the same. So it's my choice. I have to give the casting vote, and I'll vote for an extension. And as I say, we'll have a break now until 10 to 7. Thank you. Right then, members, thank you very much for being promptly back from the break. We've got to the point where we have normally some questions from members of the committee in case there's anything that needs clearing up. Wait a minute, I need 1 second. However, before that, Ms Wilkinson is going to respond to some of those many points raised in the public speaking section. So you'd like to come back on some of that. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try and be relatively brief. Many of the issues I consider are covered within the report, either within the relevant sections or within the other matters section. So I won't go through everything. There are just a few points I wish to raise in terms of clarification and correction, if I may. Firstly, in terms of the highway matters, I've got feedback, my apologies, I don't know why that's happening. One of the points that were raised was that there was no modelling for the highway junctions and the capacity and those areas. I would just highlight that was all done at the outline stage. So at the outline stage, when we determined the junctions and the legal agreement set out those junctions in terms of which junctions were required to make the development acceptable and to ensure the number of units being proposed. That was the key. When we approved an outline of 904 units, we had to be satisfied that 904 units could be accommodated on the highway network. So all of the capacity studies and the highway works were done as part of the environmental statement that was considered as part of the outline stage and submitted as part of the outline stage. I thought it might be useful just to read some sections of the committee report that councillors considered at the reserve matters stage, at the outline stage, apologies, just very, very briefly, where the junctions were discussed. Just so I thought it might be useful because it's done a lot with A, B, C, D. So if councillors had seen that and anything, just for clarity. So Great Preston Road, Smallbrook Lane is junction B, Westridge Cross, junction C, and then the on-site networks were J, K and L. What the conclusions of Island Road at the time were junctions B, C, D, G, J, K and L have all been evaluated in respect of design standards and capacity, with swept path analyses also being provided. The principle of each of these junctions are acceptable. That was the comment at the time and covered in the report for the outline application in relation to those junctions. It was therefore concluded that the application had identified adequate highway improvement works to ensure the proposed additional traffic resulting from the development could be accommodated by the wider highway network in accordance with DM2 and DM17. So those were looked through, and councillors may recall that the original application of Pennyfeathers was refused. The outline then went prior to the conclusion commented that the previous application was also refused on the grounds of submitted transport assessment, provided insufficient information in order to establish the off-site highway improvements would be adequate. This application, that being the outline, overcomes these concerns, providing adequate highway improvement plans. It is on that basis that the Section 106 agreement required those junction works to be done as part of the development, and why the number of units was set at 904. So there is the information in relation to the junction capacity and the network work. It was just dealt with at the outline stage. A reserve matters is in essence condition compliance for an outline. The outline is the permission. Therefore, to establish that 904 units is acceptable and the associated commercial floor space, the traffic generation was looked at the outline stage. So there is modelling. It was just done earlier, so it's not as part of the reserve matters application. In relation to the comments in terms of affordable housing and that there should be more socially rented and that we should ask for more than set out, I would highlight that the legal agreement that has been signed and forms part of the consent defines the affordable housing scheme. As part of that definition, it stipulates which shall provide no less than 35% of the total number of dwellings as affordable housing, with these affordable housing dwellings being a mix of 24% of the total number of dwellings as affordable rent or social rent dwellings, and 11% of the total number of dwellings as immediate dwellings or as discount market sale units. It then sets out in the definition of discount market sale unit that is 80% of market value. That is in the existing Section 106 agreement that was agreed and signed as part of the outline consent. Therefore, that is a matter already determined by this council, in essence. In terms of comments in relation to the drainage and that the capacity should be in place before, the reference was made to the term should. That is entirely under control of Southern Water. They agree the point in which the applicant connects to their network. So if they believe that the capacity should be in place, they should be providing it as part of an agreement with the developer. It is also ironically called a Section 106 agreement, which is somewhat confusing, but Section 106 of the Water Industries Act opposed to the Planning Act. And that is under their control, not under the control of the local planning authority. The only other comment I wanted to come back on was a point where I think it was referred to officers disregarding the comments of the crime and design officer. I just wanted to highlight that they haven't been disregarded, that they are referenced in the report in relation to their comments and responded to within the other matters section. I'm not going to go through them in detail because they are discussed in the report, but I thought what might be useful, and it draws back to comments that were raised in the presentation. Councillors would have noted in the presentation I talked about the positioning of houses within phases 5 and 6 to overlook, to give natural surveillance to the open space. I referred to the fact that the multiple units have defendable space at the front. They also have gardens at the back. That's also referenced in the design elements of the report. Therefore, some of the comments of the crime design advisor are saying units should. It doesn't say they must. It doesn't say they haven't. So what officers done within the report have highlighted those points in which those elements are incorporated. There is defendable space for the houses at the front and at the rear. There is natural surveillance over much of the open space. When you have a scheme of this scale that incorporates a significant amount of public open space, you can't have units facing it all, or you simply wouldn't have such big areas. It's self-controlling. But the layout has been designed to ensure that in all areas possible, there is natural surveillance of that open space. There is defendable space. The flatted units do have areas within their layout for open space. Yes, much of it is public with the incorporation of laps and leaps and neeps and various different play areas. But they are all naturally surveyed by the windows of those flats, so they're considered to be safe. There is also an abundance of open space on site to ensure that the residents of those flatted developments, although they may not have private gardens, have easy access to open space and amenity value of those areas. So it's in the report. I do discuss those ways in which the layout has responded to the opinions of the crime design officer in regards to what should be incorporated, and those areas where they haven't necessarily taken it on board. There are some points where high fences are recommended. Officers would generally seek hedgerows, potentially with spiky species, rather than fences, in order that there's an aesthetic associated with it rather than a high fence. In some areas, yes, there won't be high fences, but I think there is a balance between design and the provision of safe spaces and the street scene and the character and context of the area. And it is that balance that officers consider the layout has achieved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Are there any remaining questions? Councillor Jarman.
Just a few. Perhaps I'll do them in small batches. May want to take notes. So the first one I have, and I think it's probably been answered already, at least in part, is would there be anything here to stop us putting down an additional requirement, for example, that